my housekeeping before we begin. We will be taking questions, but we'd like to wait till the end of the webinar to take the questions. So please jot your questions down and hold them till the end. And then we'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. I'd like to draw your attention to the right side of the screen under the File section. There you will find the PowerPoint that will be presented as a handout and a list of resources. And also at the end, when you leave the webinar, you'll be guided to an evaluation. And please take the time to fill out that evaluation so that we get your feedback for future webinars. Please be sure to mute your speakers on your computer so that we do not receive any feedback and no one can hear anything that you have to say right now. So I would like to introduce to you our two presenters for this afternoon. We have Adam Kraus, who's from Adam Kraus Consulting, and we have Mike Marotta from Inclusive Technology Solutions. So I'm going to hand it over to them to begin, and then we will be back at the end to take any questions you might have. So please, gentlemen.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
My name is Adam, and with Mike Marotta, we're going to talk about assistive technology supports for transition from high school. I'm an assistive technology consultant, a residence certified assistive technology professional, and I've been doing this for a little while, about 25 years, working primarily in northern half of New Jersey and New York City. I have a consulting company. I'm also an adjunct instructor at Kane University, and I just published a mini ebook on assistive technology supports for pre-writing and ID organization.
And good afternoon, or if you're listening to the recording, good whatever it is, morning, afternoon, or night. My name is Mike. Similar to Adam, Adam made me laugh when he said that. I've been doing this for a little while. I've also been doing assistive technology for a little while, like Adam. And pretty much the things that Adam mentioned are very similar to what I do. I'm a resident certified ATP, an evaluator for AT, and a trainer. I also am an adjunct professor at Ramapo College and at Felician College, as well as some of the other pieces of information that are up there now. So I'm excited to be here with Adam this afternoon and talking with you guys. As we go through our discussion, like Dawn mentioned, we'll get to questions at the end, but there is a chat window too. If you want to drop things in there, you certainly feel free to drop things in the chat. Maybe Adam and I can get to things as we're moving through our time. But please feel free. We want to hear from you as we do this.
Okay, so to introduce the topic, transition is an important event in students with disabilities K-12 career, and it's important that assistive technology is included in the discussion about transition, because if students are using assistive technology in school, chances are very good that they will also need them after school. And a good place to begin for assistive technology supports is while the student is still in K-12 school. That's really the place to find out what tools are going to work best for the student, and for the student to become proficient in the use of those tools. Because many tools that help with academics are also going to be useful after school in a work situation, in a higher education situation, etc. And it's important to look at all areas of need of a student, including communication supports, executive function skills, reading, writing, note-taking, math, etc., all the other functional areas. Some important things that families should be thinking about with regard to assistive technology for transition is start as early as possible. You don't want to try to catch up, when the student's about to graduate, because there's an amount of time that you need for trial and error to learn what's going to work for the student and for the student to be comfortable with the tools. Another thing that's very important is that after your student graduates from high school, it's up to you and your child to self-advocate for themselves. In other words, they're going to have to let their employer know, or their college know, or a day program know that they might need assistive technology supports for different activities. And that's a big paradigm shift from being in school where it's up to the school to talk to the student and to provide the student with the technology supports. Mike, would you like to add anything to that?
No, I think that was a perfect example, and it leads us nicely into that next slide where we're going to talk about that idea of, you know, thinking about this paradigm shift of when you're in K through 12, the technology potentially is there through the school. There is a team in place to support your child. And then when you move to this next phase and transition to whatever it is that next phase is going to be, how do we ensure that technology follows? I think it's a really important piece to remember that if technology was working in K to 12 because you started early and you explored all those things that Adam mentioned, which were really important, that idea of getting started as early as you can, finding the things that work, having successes with technology. Once you get out of school, don't reinvent the wheel. If things were working, find a way to continue on that path to have them work. If you had tools that helped with executive function and organization and reading and writing, well, those tools should still work in the next phase of the student's life, because the task may change, but the function that the tool is supporting is the same. It is still reading, it is still writing. It may have a little bit different task set, but it still is the same. So think about that, and don't start from square one. Think about the tools that are in place for the student and will they follow that student along. And then talk and connect with adult service providers that can find a way to bridge that gap. You know, there have been instances where adult organizations, so organizations that have a focus on adults, will work collaboratively with schools to have a sharing of technology or a buyback, and I put air quotes around that, a buyback of technology for whatever it is worth at that point. So think about that. It doesn't mean from starting from scratch to find tools, because in some cases, the tools that the student uses in school may be so customized for that student, it doesn't make sense sometimes for a school to take that back to use it for another student. It might be easier to just move forward and find a tool that works for this other student. So keep that in mind. Look to connect with DDD and DVR. And these are for our people in New Jersey, by the way, those two acronyms. Connect with SPAN. We have it in that big yellow bullet over there on the side. Connect with them. Find those resources. Towards the end of the webinar, we'll have a list, and actually it's in your files that you can download if you'd like, which is the resource list. But we'll also give you a link to where it lives online, so you can download it or print it or go right to the resources. Find those resources that are out there. There are a lot of resources out there. Make sure you use them.
That's good. Good, Mike. I just wanted to add one quick point, and that is when your child is going through the transition planning process with your IEP team, make sure that the assistive technology is also on the table, because I think from my experience, a lot of IEP teams are not always thinking about assistive technology in the context of transition, but it really should be part of it. And often it's up to the parent to bring that to the table and say, you know, we should also be talking about assistive technology after my child graduates.
Yeah, good point.
Okay, just a little more background information on assistive technology. In the IDEA legislation, assistive technology is talked about in two contexts. One is the things, the devices, the software, the apps, the things that can be purchased and used and touched and modified. The other piece, which is equally important, are the services. And the most important is training. If you really, everyone, including the student, the teachers, the teacher aides, therapists, and the family members need to learn how to use the technology. Also, there's going to be needed support for modifying, customizing, purchasing, setup support for the assistive technology. So it's important that when your child gets technology, that there's also a discussion about the services that are going to support its use. Here's the definition of assistive technology in case you ever need it. The key words here are technology is used to increase, maintain, or improve the functional capabilities of a child with a disability. So if the technology does one of those three for a child with disability, then it is allowable as assistive technology.
And that's so important, that piece, and I'm so glad that Adam pointed that out. In that very large definition of AT device, that is really the chunk that we have to focus on, is that idea of any tool, any technology device that we talk about can be assistive technology for someone if it meets that criteria. If it increases, maintains, or improves the functional capabilities of a child with a disability, that is assistive technology, regardless of what that device might be, if it meets that criteria. So it's important to think broadly about technology and about the tools that you put in place for the student.
Great point, Mike. Okay, here's just a detailed list of what's included under assistive technology services in IDEA. So this slide and the next slide give it to you in gory detail, including exactly where it's listed in IDEA.
Yeah, I think like anything else, I think a lot of times people are very aware of the definition of an assistive technology device, but less aware of the definition of service. And the service piece, and Adam and I could probably talk for a whole hour on this. The service piece is where things either happen or don't. This is where you get success or failure with device or device abandonment in this part. And so people have to focus on this part. To me personally, this is more important than the device piece. We just think finding a device, once you focus on what that device does and does it match that person's needs, finding the device is in some instances the easier part. This part, the service, the actual implementation of the tool, becomes much trickier and it's much more involved, and it's the part that people don't always spend the time on. And so we need to keep reminding people that that's the case, that this is important.
Absolutely. And I find that you're going to have more success if you talk about the services from the very beginning. So if you're going to go in and talk to your IEP team and say, well, I think my child might benefit from assistive technology, make sure that the services are included in that conversation from step one.
Yeah, definitely. So true. All right, so now that we got the definitions out of the way, we feel better, right, Adam? We feel better. Everything's out there now. That's good. Let's talk about the pieces that a lot of people want to look at, which is actually, let's talk about some of the tools that may be helpful. And so as we went through and tried to start thinking about, and as Adam and I were organizing our thoughts for this, the idea of what were the main areas that we would focus on. And so here they are in your nice bulleted list here. We'll do a little exploration of some tools for writing, for note-taking, reading, communication, organization, time management and scheduling. Within each of those pieces, within each of those categories, we will look at things that are ranged from a low-tech to a high-tech support, because we need to remember, not all assistive technology is high-tech. There are low-tech solutions, and in some instances, low-tech is the better solution. So we can't discount that. Sure, it's great to have an iPad with all these new apps on it. That's great. But if all I need is an adapted pencil to help me write, well, then an adapted pencil is the appropriate piece at that point. So don't discount those low-tech things. The only other thing I'll say about this slide before we jump in and start talking about things is that the tools that are coming up that Adam and I will be talking about, we've only given them to you as examples. This is not an endorsement, and it's not to say this is the only tool that will do this. But it's just examples of tools in these different categories that will work for you. The other last caveat I'll give you before we move forward, we don't intend this demonstration list to be a shopping list. Don't leave here with the thought of, I must buy everything. Because some of these things do exactly the same thing, but maybe do it a little differently. And that's where you need to talk with your team and a professional to figure out what are the features that make the most sense for my child moving forward. And so as we go through these, Adam and I will point out features and we'll talk about the difference of what those are. But I just wanted to get it out there at first before we start diving in, because I hate to see people go out and purchase $50 worth of apps and 5 of them do the same exact thing. So we want to make sure we keep that kind of out in the front there. All right. Use something, Adam?
Yeah, I just want to add one quick point, because that was great, Mike. And that is, if at all possible, it's really, really helpful to try something out before you decide. We're seeing, I'm sure Mike is, I see a lot more technology being purchased for a student without the student having an opportunity to even try it. And that's really counter to the whole philosophy of assistive technology. You really have to make sure that it's good for the student, and the best way to do that is to have the student try it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you're right. I think what we've seen is we've moved to a technology culture of apps. And so for a lot of the apps, they're relatively inexpensive. You know, when I think inexpensive in an app, I think under $15, somewhere around there. So people are willing to just buy these and try them. But what we're finding, like anything else, if you buy one $15 app and it doesn't work, you say, all right, well, I spent $15 and it didn't work. If you suddenly are now in 3 or 4 $15 apps, well, now you're up to almost $50, and you still haven't found something that works. So take a step back and work the process a little bit so that you can make sure that you find the tool that works for people. All right, so we'll jump in. We'll start with writing. We'll give you some quick little examples. And again, our low to high tech. A low-tech support for writing is an adapted pencil or a pencil grip, and then move through some of these other choices. If that doesn't work, can I adapt the paper for the person? Can I look at changing the keyboard, perhaps, to make it easier for someone to use a device? Then we start moving towards the more involved pieces, and we'll talk about those a little deeper right now. This idea of using other tools. One of the biggest ones that we talk about a lot is voice recognition. And what's interesting about this, and the slide that you're seeing up there, the picture on the screen, is of the inventors of Dragon Naturally Speaking. And this is back in the 90s when it was called Dragon Dictate. And this was a full standalone computer system that all it would do was allow you to dictate into the computer. And at the time it came out, this was a $10,000 solution. And it was not particularly good by any stretch of the imagination. It took time. It was a slow process to do this. So that's where we saw technology start, with this idea of voice recognition. But now, fast forward to today, pretty much every device we have, whether it's a mobile device or a computer, will allow us to use our voice to either navigate that device or do text entry. So suddenly the process of writing has become a little easier for people because of the availability. You have Apple products with Siri. You have Android devices that have their own ability to do voice typing. You have, if you're working with individuals that are doing Google Apps for education and they're using Google Docs for everything, Google Docs has voice typing built right into it. Turn it on, start talking, and it will write for you. So, I mean, these are not devices and products anymore that we need to spend a lot of money to get. What's important to remember is voice dictation is not right for everyone. And there's more to it than just being able to speak clearly. I know a lot of times I'll talk with teams and they'll say, well, this is the perfect student for this because he talks, and he talks well. Okay, that's great. That is important, and that is a ability that the student needs to bring to this process. But what about the idea of being able to effectively construct a sentence so that, like anything else, if I dictate in and my thoughts are disjointed and there is no punctuation and I don't know the process of putting a sentence together and constructing it, the fact that I got a lot of words on the screen doesn't mean a whole lot. It hasn't moved me forward. So remember, there is more to it than just being able to talk. And so thinking about that. But the technology itself has become very inexpensive, and in fact, in most instances, free. So we don't have to worry about it too much. Some of the other writing tools we mentioned on that first slide where we talked about the continuum there is the idea of using word prediction. On the top right of this screen is a program called CoWriter Universal. This works right in your browser. So if you use the Chrome browser, you can open this up and the box will float next to your cursor and give you word choices. So as you type, word choices will come up, kind of like we all are very familiar with on our phones now. We start typing on our phone, and as we're texting, what happens? The phone gives us word choices, or it suggests words, or it drops words in that we sometimes don't want, but it drops them in there. Word prediction is the same type of tool, but for an individual who is a slow typist or a poor speller, word prediction on a computer can be huge because it will speed the process up and it will effectively give the student word choices that are spelled correctly regardless of how the student types them in. So it is a very powerful tool, word prediction. And then the other tool at the bottom is another floating toolbar that works on the Chrome browser, and this is called the Read and Write for Google. And this gives us tools for writing as well as reading, hence the name. But it gives us word prediction. It gives us the ability to do voice dictation. And then it also gives us text-to-speech support for reading as we go through. So there are a lot of different options there, again, from just those two tools. And I think Adam's going to show a quick video of Clicker Docs, which is an app for your iPad. And so I'll let him describe that.
Okay, thanks. So I'm going to load a video, which, oh, there it is. Okay, so here's a quick video of Clicker Docs. It's an iPad app that has text-to-speech and word prediction and word banks. So as I'm typing, it's speaking each letter. Word prediction is along the top of the keyboard. I could also hear the word before I select it. And I'm going to a word bank here, which is customizable. I apologize for the scratchy audio, but one of the advantages of this program is that as you're typing, you're getting this steady stream of audio feedback, and you can adjust it. In this case, we had every letter spoken as you type it, the word spoken when you hit the space bar, and then the whole sentence spoken when you hit the period. And the goal of using a program like this is to support independent self-correction. So if the student can hear it, and if they hear something different than they think they wrote, and they can go back and fix it, then that's really great. You've provided them with a higher degree of independence for the writing process.
Nice.
All right, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint. Whoops. All right. That was the wrong document. Sorry about that. Here we go. Okay.
Nice. Perfect.
Okay, so the next, whoops, sorry about that.
That was me, Adam. Sorry.
Oh, where are we?
Sorry. Should never give two people control over the buttons at the same time.
Okay, here we are, note-taking. So note-taking, in case you haven't noticed, is a really hard task for just about everyone. And for students with listening challenges or writing challenges or higher order thinking challenges, note-taking can be extremely, extremely difficult, but super important for both success in school and after school. Some low-tech note-taking supports are note-taking templates, a digital voice recorder, which you can buy just about at any electronics store. Also, a lot of smartphones have the ability to record sound, so that's also another option. A pen with an integrated voice recorder, similar to the LiveScribe pen, which we're going to demonstrate in a little while. Note-taking programs and apps, which Mike is going to demonstrate. And interactive whiteboard programs like the Smartboard, where the teacher is writing the notes in an electronic whiteboard system, and those notes can be saved and emailed to a student after the fact. And two note-taking supports we have here are the LiveScribe pen, sometimes called the Echo pen, and Audio Note, which is an app for a tablet. So I'm going to show a video of the LiveScribe pen. In just a minute. All right, here we go. So the LiveScribe pen has two components. There's the pen itself, and then you have to use special microdot paper. Turning on the recording.
The U.S. government has three branches: the legislative, the judicial, and the executive branch. Congress has two houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives. The U.S. government has three branches: legislative, the judicial, and the executive branch. Congress has two houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives.
So you'll see that it records everything that is being spoken or said or any sound while you're writing. And then if you go back and touch that writing, it's going to replay the part of the recording that occurred while that was being written. This is very helpful for students who might not be fast enough writers to keep up with the teacher or the instructor's spoken notes. or whatever they're saying, but it's also helpful for students who have difficulty categorizing or synthesizing, because they could just write a keyword or two and then go back and listen to the audio notes after the fact and fill in their written notes. Now we're going to switch over to another video of Mike talking about Audio Note app.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. So really, when we think about the LiveScribe pen versus an app, the function is the same. So what you'll see is the end result is the same. What we're looking at is two different ways we get there. And so with this app, and so let me set the scene a little bit before I start this. I put on a video on my laptop, and then I was going to take notes from that video. You'll see the note-taking piece is very similar, but with the app, there is no additional pieces. I don't need to have the pen with the special paper. Instead, I'm using the app. The app has a recording function built into it. And as I type and follow along and make my notes, it has recorded that audio and connected those two.
What does it mean to spend our time well? I spend a lot of my time thinking about how to spend my time. Probably too much. I probably obsess over it. My friends think I do. But I feel like I kind of have to. Because these days it feels like little bits of my time kind of slip away from me. And when that happens, it feels like parts of my life are slipping away. Specifically, it feels like little bits of my time get slipped away to various things like this, like technology. I check things. I'll give you an example. If this email shows up, how many of you have gotten an email like this, right? I've been tagged in a photo. When this appears, I can't help but click on it right now. Right? It's like, what if it's a bad photo? So I have to click it right now. But I'm not just going to click see photo. What I'm actually going to do is spend the next 20 minutes. What does it mean to are slipping away? Specifically, it feels like, how many of you have gotten an email like this, right? I've been tagged in a photo.
So you see what happens with this idea of this time stamping of audio is I don't have to be very good at note-taking. Or if the note-taking process is difficult, I don't have to worry about, did I get everything written down? And that's the power of these two tools that we just showed you, is this idea of it doesn't matter if you write poorly, if you miss an important piece, because you'll have the recording to go back to. Simply make yourself a notation in some way that reminds you, this is what I need to go back and listen to. So you saw that person in that video was doing an entire discussion about an email that he got. Well, I didn't write down everything he said. I wrote the word email. So now I can go back and listen to it. And I think it's important to remind students as they move through it, as they're students in K-12, and especially as they go out into the world, remind them that this is easier to do if you rely on the tool to provide that support. And in fact, when Adam was given his example, I have this student that I had worked with who was missing large chunks of his class in college because of a processing issue. And when he recognized something as important, by the time he bent down to write it on his notebook and then look back up to re-engage with the class was onto something else. And then he missed everything. And so what we did for him is he used the LiveScribe pen, and instead of writing any words at all he did was make a mark on the page. He drew an X or a check mark. And so at the end of his class, all he would have was a page full of check marks. But what he would do is then go back to each of those check marks, tap the pen against the paper, listen to what it was saying, and then write a note alongside of it that would help him remember. So there was not this worry of, I need to be engaged in my note writing at this point. No, what you need is to be engaged in the class and then have the notes for afterwards. So it was really interesting for him. And he found he did much better in his classes because he was able to be engaged in the conversation, engaged in the lesson as it was happening. It wasn't always something he was catching up with. It's really kind of an interesting tools, to say the least.
Good point, Mike.
Yeah, so as we'll continue on, and Adam and I are keeping an eye on our time as we go as well, we'll move into the area of reading. Again, the issue of having supports for reading as we move through. Again, low tech to high tech, large print materials, reading guides, study guides, any of those pieces that can help us navigate through text, whatever it might be. Electronic dictionaries, apps. There are dictionary apps. There are dictionary websites you can go to and get support for words. You can hear words spoken. Looking at audiobooks or digital books that talk. So text that can be pushed through an app or a software tool to give it text to speech, the ability to talk out loud for you. And then finally, some examples of some scan and read. And we'll show one of those in a second. And really, when we think about this, we're talking about materials and making sure they're accessible for the individual. So we look at this concept of accessible educational materials. And this is brought to us by an organization called CAST, and there's their website, aim.cast.org, aem.cast.org. They talk about the 4 formats for accessible materials: audio, braille, large print, and digital text. So when we think about technology, we're mostly dealing with audio and digital text. Braille we might be to an extent as well if someone has a refreshable Braille display connected to a device. But most parts we're talking about digital text and audio. So what we think about is, how do we find materials? And so we gave you a bunch of examples here that you could go to, and all of the links are in your resource page to get you examples. In many of the schools for K-12, they will use things like Bookshare and perhaps even Learning Ally. Those are 2 services that provide access to materials for students with print disabilities. And so you can do that. Bookshare provides it to you in a digital text format that then you have to move through a device to have it read to you. Learning Ally is audio, so it's human-read books that can be read aloud through a device. People are familiar with audible.com. That is a commercial service that sells audiobooks. So if your individual is struggling with text, maybe you go to Audible and find that. If you're looking to listen to the classics or access the classic books, there are 2 options there. Project Gutenberg is a resource that gives you access to the text, digital text of classic books that you can download and use on any device. The audio component of that is an organization called LibriVox, and that is public domain audiobooks. So these are your classic books in an audiobook format. And so that gives you some examples of where to find materials. You know, getting materials for the individuals to access is a difficult process sometimes, and that takes a lot of work. This is part of that service piece, less about the device and more about the service. How am I connecting in to get materials? And then that other piece that we mentioned before, that idea of getting access to print materials quickly. There's a lot of apps that do this now. This used to be a very expensive process involving scanners and software tools and computers that were very involved. Now, these are supports we can get through apps that are sometimes about $10 and less. And you have a couple examples up here on the screen of different apps and what they will allow you to do. Each of these will work the same way. It's just different options. They will let you take a picture from your mobile device of a print material, and it will convert that print into text on the device that can be read out loud. So if you're struggling with print, whether it's the mail or handouts, or if you go into the community somewhere and there is things printed and written down that you are not a reader, there are things that will give you access to that. And I'll give you one example from a video. It's going to be the bottom one there, the Claro. The one I'm going to show you is called Claro Scan Pen. Really nice app that allows you to take a picture of anything. So right now you'll see that I have a magazine. Let me start it from the beginning so you can see it. So here we go. So here we have a magazine that I'm just going to flip open, and that's my iPad. Ignore the big stand and everything else. It just happens to be that's how it was connected. But what you'll do when you open it is simply take a picture of the page, and what the app will do is it will move through, and sorry for the little lag in the video if you're seeing that. I am on my end. I'm not sure if you are. You'll take a picture of the page. The app will scan through and do the OCR, the optical character recognition. So it will convert that picture to text. And then if I simply just move my finger across the lines of the text on the picture, the app will read that text out loud.
That's great, Mike. Just
Okay, so
one
as
thing
you
I
go
wanted
through,
to add to that is this is really helpful if you're in class or at a work situation and you're given something on paper that you don't have an electronic format and you need to access it really quickly. Something like Claro ScanPen is a great app for that.
Yeah, it really does. And again, that's the trick, is for that community involvement. And suddenly I need access to things quickly, and I don't have time to ask someone, can you get that printed in some way that I can listen to it, or read that to me. Now it becomes an independence thing, is that I can be more independent, even if I am a non-reader, because I have a tool like that. And that ScanPen app, I found it works really well with a range of print. That's always a concern with that, is that what is the font of the document that you're looking to convert, and it works pretty good across most fonts. What I found is that your picture needs to be really clear, so it becomes a process of making sure you take a good picture, enough light, you're close enough to the print that it can see it, those kinds of things. Some other things, if we're talking about access to print and looking at ways to get digital text read aloud, there is an app called Voice Dream Reader that works on both mobile platforms, which will give you the ability to take digital text and have it read aloud to someone off their mobile device. Excellent, excellent tool as you go through. And then I give you another example up there of a Chrome tool, which is called Snap and Read Universal, which attaches itself to your browser and allows you to read any text on the screen aloud. That is one of the few tools that I found that works really well with Amazon books. So if you have Kindle books, you can read them in your browser. That will read those aloud. It does a really nice job of that. So it's one of the few tools I found that does that.
Okay. Mike, should we take a look at the Bookshare web reader, or should we move on? What do you think?
What about we move through, and if we have
Great.
time, we'll go back to it?
That's right, because we are.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, I'm watching our time, and we're about 10 minutes from the top of the hour.
This might be our last section. What do you think?
Yeah, we have. There's two more, but they're relatively quick. So
all right. So communication. Many students with disabilities require supports for expressive and receptive communication, and some low-tech communication supports are communication books, which I think are definitely underused these days in schools. So don't forget about the low-tech communication supports. Easy to make, and sometimes they're very, very useful. There's also single message devices that use recorded speech. Speech generating devices with overlays, which are considered to be medium tech, and speech generating devices with dynamic screens. Those could be standalone devices, like a Dynavox or a Pranky-Romic device, computer-based systems or systems that are based on an iPad or other tablets or smartphones. I'm going to show you a brief demonstration of an app called Sonoflex Lite, which is kind of a medium level communication support. But I just also want to talk about the two others on this page. Go Talk Now is an app, iPad app, that's really very good for students who are at the emergent level of communication skills. And ProLoco2Go is the most popular communication app, and many of you may have heard of it. But just to let you know that it's not for everyone. It's a great app, but make sure that when you're picking an app for communication, that you really go through an evaluation process where you're able to try a variety of apps and devices before deciding on which one is the right one. All right, so let's bring up that video. There we go. All right, so this is Sonoflex Lite. I'm going to create a sentence which goes in that top box called the message window, and then when I'm done creating the sentence, I'm going to touch that and you'll hear the whole sentence. Having trouble finding the right word? There we go. And one thing that's important about this type of a communication system is that things are categorized. So it's important that categorization is a skill that the user is adept with.
I want to go to the beach.
And obviously the fine motor skills is important, the ability to isolate the finger and to point to items. Although if a student doesn't have the fine motor skills, they still could access this through a switch and a switch access device.
Not great. I'm thirsty.
Going back to the presentation.
All right, and as we move into these last couple sections, this is an interesting section, so critical to success, but so personalized for each person. It's really hard sometimes to give people examples of things that they should use to help organize themselves and manage their time, because everybody is different. But there are some things we can start with and see if that works. So you look at the low tech. Are we doing color coding? That helps for a lot of people. Match the colors across all of the areas that they might be moving through. Agenda books, schedule books, whatever it might be. Things that are simple that can keep people on track. Graphic organizers. There are many programs out there that will let you create visual graphics of your ideas. So the one on the screen is called Inspiration. And that is a tool that has pretty much a use for just about every device you can think of. It is a software tool that will work on your computers. It is an iOS app, so it's an Apple app. And there's also an online version called Webspiration. Same idea, in that you can use this to get your ideas down visually and then connect them together to make that writing succinct or to organize your thoughts. The other thing for organization, and again, it's on the right-hand side, but think about things like Google Drive or Dropbox or any of these web-based solutions for organization. Evernote. Evernote is a great one because it works on multiple devices and it lets you organize your materials into folders. Starting off with a good organization system is critical to make sure that someone can continue on and be successful. Finding a system that works for them, and that's the trick, is I will usually suggest things to people and then we will try them, and sometimes they stick, other times they don't because it's not the right connection for them. So we move on and we try something else. but it has to make sense for the person. Just think about yourself. How excited would you be if someone thrust their organization strategy onto you? We all have our own, good, bad, or otherwise. We won't go into that now, but we all have our own organization strategy. And so we need to make sure that we have enough suggestions to let the individuals find the strategy that works for them. And the same is true with time management and scheduling. So Adam will chat about that.
Okay, so time management and scheduling are also very important skills both in school and after school. I've heard some people say that college success is all about managing time, or really, really dependent upon it. And there's a variety of visual timers, calendar programs, smartwatches, iPhone and smartphone apps with reminders, things like Google Calendar, and the reminders apps. So there's lots of great tools that you might already own if you own a smartphone, or if you have an account with Google. It's just a matter of learning how to use them and then putting them into practice. So there's a lot of great time management and scheduling tools out there, which is great news, and lots of choices.
Yeah, lots of choices and very personalized. So what's nice about apps, especially the apps for time management and scheduling, most of those tend to be free, or there is a free version of it, so you get a chance to try it, see if it works. And that's one area I always point people towards trying them, to see if it makes sense. Does it give the right notifications? Does it help you organize your thoughts in the right way, and organize your ideas, your schedule, your tasks, your to-do list, all that fun stuff? Does it put it together? And I think the smartwatches is going to be the next big wave that we see with organization, especially for individuals with disabilities. Smartwatches that they can wear that give notifications and reminders of when things need to happen throughout a day. So that'll be kind of interesting to see as we continue on with this process. So we're close to the top of the hour. We left a few minutes for questions, and we can certainly go through some of them now. I'll leave this resource up. You have the resource in the file list. You have the resource list, but if you want to get to it online, there's its link, which is bit.ly/spanresources. And then we also have a survey. No need to worry about going to it now. When the webinar finishes, you will be directed right to the survey. And if you could just take a couple minutes and fill it out, that would be huge for us, so we know that we met your needs today.
So,
but I'll leave it to...
I wanted to say thank you to Adam and Mike. That was great, chock full of so much information, more than I ever realized was out there. So people are beginning to write some questions. Do you want me to read them, Mike and Adam, or do you want to just read them yourselves? It's up to you. The first one is from Jenica Nil.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
She says, I found an app to Prolo Quo for only $79, Talk Tablet by Gus Communications. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I am not.
And it's just her letting you know that.
That's good. Gus, okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I know Gus is a company that has communication things for quite a while, so I think that's good. I think anytime somebody's looking at an AAC app, so a communication app, some of the things I remind them to look at is take price out of it for a second. Is what do you need it to do? Do you need it to be picture-based with text also? Do you need to be able to create folders and pages that link off to other pages? Do you need to embed your own pictures into it to navigate through? Those are the kind of features you need in one of those apps. And if you can get that through a $79 app, that's even better. That's great.
The other thing just to add,
oh, go ahead, Adam, sorry.
For communication, and this is really important, is get a speech therapist involved in the process. This is so critical. Just make sure that person is on the team and helping you pick the best app, because it's not a non-trivial decision.
Yeah.
So Carol writes, in relation to the digital question, I may be wrong, but I seem to remember that it depends on your digital recorder as to the functionality of digital transcription. Another option might be to have a student in the class provide copies of their notes instead. Many colleges use this system.
I would always say to people, if the student is moving on to college, your first call at that college should be to the student services department and find out what services they offer, and get connected with those people there, because they're going to be the lifeline for the student moving through their time there. And Carol is right. There, sometimes the digital recorders will have a transcription ability, but as I mentioned to Jenica earlier in the chat, some are hit or miss. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they get everything, sometimes they don't. It depends on the speaker, and it depends on the environmental noise around how well an app or a tool is going to be able to transcribe something. So that's going to be something you need to look at and play around with it.
Someone has a question about ATP. Is that a certification? Is it hard to find, or the qualified individuals can do AT evals?
So, Adam, you
Sure.
want to explain an ATP?
An ATP is a certification. It's from an organization called RESNA, RESNA, which is the National Professional Organization for people working in the field of assistive technology. On their website, which is resna.org, they have a directory of all the folks that have the ATP certification listed by state. And in many cases, it's a good idea to have someone with the ATP certification doing an assistive technology evaluation, although there are other professionals that can also be very experienced in assistive technology, like speech therapists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, that could be equally qualified to do an assistive technology evaluation. It's all about experience.
I agree. Perfect answer.
Thanks, Mike.
You're welcome. Let's see. And now I caught up to the chat, Dawn, so I could see. Does Clicker Docs have PEC symbols communication? Can you do PEC symbols in Clicker Docs?
Not that I know of. How about you, Mike?
Yeah, I don't think so. No, I don't think so either. Pam, I'm not positive, but I don't think so. It might be a question for the people at Crick. Visit their website and send that over and ask them, but I don't think so. Susan asked, do many of the apps have free trial periods? There are a large percentage of apps that will have maybe not a trial, but what they will call a light version. And a light version can give you two different types of function. It may give you all of the features of the app, but only for a short period of time, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks. Or the other version of a light app you might see is an app that they will give you, but it doesn't have all the features activated. So it will only have some. So if you're going to do a light app, I would read through the description very carefully and make sure that the light app is going to give you the features you want to trial. Because if you get a trial and then you realize that the app's had some of the features turned off and you can't do it anyway, it won't be that effective.
Good point.
And then let's see. Alexis talks about note-taking. Note-taking and the distance from the speaker. Oh, that's such a great question. And her second part was the idea of a large classroom or a lecture hall. And this is one of those ones where we can say definitively, it depends. It very much depends on the device. And it also depends on the size, shape of the room, and the environmental factors. I will often tell the students I work with, do not sit in the front row unless you need to visually to be able to see the board and see the professor or the teacher. Because what happens is if you sit in the front row and there's conversation from behind you, you might miss it. So if there's questions asked or if there's people sharing, you might not hear that. You may hear the speaker from the front. They're not good about rephrasing and stating the question. So you might have to find a happy medium somewhere.
That's a good point. That's
Adam,
a good point.
I don't know if you have...
The other thing is Devices like the LiveScribe pen, they have different microphones. There's a plug-in mic that has a setting for listening at a distance, or setting for listening close. But basically the rule of thumb is that just about anything you're going to hear is going to be picked up by your recording device. And that could be a good thing, or it could be not such a good thing, depending on if there's a lot of background noise.
Yeah, that's important too. You're right. Is that if you're in the middle of a row with a lot of students and there's a lot of shuffling of papers and items and noise, that's going to impact it also. So it's a really good point. Let's see. Oh, Carol! Wow, Carol has such a technical question. I got to sit and think about it for a minute. Do you happen to know of a way to voice activate into the Notes app on the iPhone and send the information to a wireless Bluetooth printer device? Ooh, short printed notes while out in the community.
Might have to think about that one.
Yeah, Carol, I have to think about that one. That's a great question. You see our email addresses there. Feel free. Tag us into an email together, and we can keep thinking about that because that's a really interesting one. Pam says, what are you using to pair switches to an iPad? Again, it depends. It depends if I'm looking to do something wirelessly or Bluetooth versus a hardwire directly in. AbleNet makes a really nice device that will wire. It's a wired device. And I think it's called the Hook. Let me make sure. I'm typing it in right now. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. The Hook switch interface. And it's actually wired. Sometimes I get a little weird of Bluetooth devices disconnecting and wireless devices.
Mike, we can't hear you that well.
Sometimes I like
There you
sorry,
go.
I moved away to type. Sorry. See, I was running two computers over here. Instead of using Bluetooth, because sometimes that disconnects and the person's kind of left kind of stranded, not being able to use it. Sometimes I like a hardwired system, and that Hook switch interface from AbleNet will let you do that. It will hardwire right into your mobile device.
Great.
I just wanted to mention, I put it in the chat box, that a couple people had asked for certificates for professional development. I put my email address there. You can email me and I will email you back a certificate.
Yes. And Carol mentioned the idea of digital recorders in presentation mode as an option. And that goes back to that idea that Adam mentioned of different microphone settings that will give you a wider listening range versus a very directed microphone. So just kind of look at the device you have and see what its options are.
Good point.
Good questions.
A couple people are typing. We could take one or two more and then we have to end. Oh, just saying thank you. I'm glad that it was helpful.
Great.
Oh, good.
You're welcome.
Okay, so thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to Mike and to Adam for that great presentation. Lots of great information. Glad that everyone seems to have found it very helpful. Again, when you exit out of this Adobe, you'll be routed to the evaluation. Please take the time to fill it out. It's just a few questions, but it really does help all of us when we schedule and develop our future webinars and presentations. So thank you so much. You will receive an email through Eventbrite with regard to the recording on our website. And we're glad that you were able to join us today.
Thanks, everyone.